Hi, Brian White is filling in for Buck Levasseur. Welcome to another edition of Discovering. Well, walleye season ended here in the Upper Peninsula, and I didn't get a chance this year to spend as much time on the ice as I had hoped. But I did manage to sneak out one last time on Little Bay De Noc with local fisherman Chris Wahl. Those of you who follow online fishing reports know him as the bait shop guy.
We're going to try doing some snap jigging with some bigger rapalas here. It's kind of a different way for a lot of people to jig with jig and rapala type baits, swim baits like that.
Making maple syrup is a tradition that is nearly as old as the UP itself. We'll check in on a UP maple syrup operation for part 1 of Making Maple Syrup. All that and more tonight right here on Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone, forests thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak, surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields, call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill, the eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Been at the bait shop a long time, but the handle kind of came just from going fishing all the time, and a lot of times, especially kids at the boat launch, really kind of got a kick out of seeing me at the boat launch. But we don't wear name tags, so they say, "Hey, you're that bait shop guy," and that just kind of stuck once we started going online and on the various forums and stuff, and so that's how I came by the bait shop guy. We're going to try doing some snap jigging with some bigger rapalas here. It's kind of a different way for a lot of people to jig with jig and rapala type baits, swim baits like that. Like the shiver minnows. Rapala's got a new bait this year, the snap wrap. Fish is basically the same, but it's a very aggressive form of jigging, to say the least. Most people are pretty subtle when it comes to jigging with the rapalas, and I'm kind of the other way around with it, and it seems to work pretty good for me. Especially we're out here right out off the harbor in Gladstone. This is an area that's just kind of known as a community meat hole. It's a well-known area. It's nobody's secret spot. So just about anybody can come out here and usually run into some fish. There's not a whole lot of big fish. It's mostly just eating-sized walleyes and a lot of small ones. But if you just got a limited amount of time to fish, it's usually a pretty good spot to come. The evening bite, usually between like 5 and 6 o'clock in the evening, is pretty good, and there's always some fish moving through here. So I guess basically just show you kind of what we do out here and see what happens here tonight. And we're in about 33 feet of water out here. One of the things that I do that's kind of different from a lot of people is I start pretty high off the bottom, at least 3 to 4 feet. The water is really clear here in Bay De Noc, so these fish, they can see your bait from a long ways away. And basically just keep it moving. I mean, snap that thing. Don't be afraid to just rip on that bait. It just seems to draw the fish in, and it just at the end of the night, if your arm's not sore, you're probably not doing it right. And it's kind of hard to do in a portable shack. Most portable shacks, the ceiling's too low. So that's why most of the time I come out and I'm just fishing out on the bare ice. out a little bit there. There we go, shaking that head. There we go. It's going to be pretty close, that one. T-bone that one pretty good. Yeah. Well, that's what they look like. Been a long time trying to get a hold of one of these guys for you here, but just measure them up real quick. Oops. He's going to be just a little short. So we'll throw it back and give us a future 30-incher here down the line. Other thing too is I seldom ever put any bait on my jigging wraps anymore. This kind of jigging, more often than not, you would just end up popping the jig, the minnow right off of the jig. As long as you keep it moving, it keeps the fish interested, and really, it may be kind of an odd thing to hear from a person who owns a bait shop, but you don't need any bait for this kind of fishing. Still, most people still just put the minnow head on the treble hook, though, on their jig, and just to get a little scent down there. Another thing we found with this kind of fishing, you got to go with a no stretch line. This is Suffix Ice Fuse, but anything like Power Pro or Fireline will all work. You need something that's got little stretch in it. You can really snap those jigs good. You can feel their bites a lot better too. At the end of that, your braided no stretch line, you can put some sort of a swivel on here. I'm experimenting right now with these Invisa swivels. It's actually made out of fluorocarbon, but it acts just the same as any little barrel swivel. And it takes some of the twist out of the line. These baits, they'll twist your line up pretty good. If you're going with a standard monofilament, it can be a kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. You don't get as much twist in the line with the braided lines. Myself, I prefer a graph, something like this. A lot of people like the flashers, and they're fine too. Anything's better than nothing, but I just use the graph out of my boat. Just an older model Lowrance, but I got my GPS built into it too. And I like having the split screen zoom, so you can, we're in 33 foot of water, but I'm zoomed in, on the bottom 15 feet. You can see that's mostly where all the action is at, but every now and then you'll have a big fish will come through, 5-10 feet down, and it's usually a big walleye. And those fish are up high like that. They're out looking for something to eat. We got another looker here. If one of them doesn't bite, I've got two other baits rigged up here. Different colors, different profiles, different sizes. Sometimes they switch it up to something different, and that'll turn a looker into a biter. If you want to jig for walleyes, especially here on Bay De Noc, you have to have electronics. You got to be able to see how these fish are reacting to your bait, and if you can't see what they're doing, it's hard to get them to bite. Like I said, some of the times you're 7-8 feet off the bottom at least before they'll finally hit a jig, and if you're just jigging blindly just a foot off the bottom, you'll never even know they're there. Yeah, they're just following it. One of them's going to bite here. I can feel it. This one's going to light up here in a second. Here it goes. Here we go. Here we go. There we go. This feels like a little bit better one. Yeah, there you go. That one will eat. Yeah, probably going to be pretty close to 15-16 inches on that one. I'll just measure them up real quick here. 16 inches on that one, so that'll be a nice eater fish there. We'll flop him down there. There's still a hot fish down there. When it gets going here, sometimes they're in groups 3, 4, and they're all really hot, so you want to get back down to them as quick as possible. The last few years, I've switched over and I'm fishing these bigger, like the number 9 jigging wraps. That's the biggest size they make. A lot of people have asked, isn't that bait too big to use for walleyes? And it couldn't be further from the truth. Once you get confidence in them, you can catch all size walleyes on them. I've caught just as many undersized fish on these bigger baits as I ever did when I was fishing with the smaller ones. They got the number 9s and the jigging rapalas. New this year, they had the snap wraps. They're just a little bit wider profile bait. just as long, just as heavy. Moonshine came out with their bigger number 3 shiver minnows here a couple of years ago, and those have been a really good bait too. Anything that glows works really good out here on the bay, and you can't beat the moonshines for their glow-in-the-dark finishes. Plus, out here off of Gladstone, we have a lot of current to deal with. And a lot of times the current's so strong, if you use anything smaller than a number 9, the current will just blow it right out of the cone angle of your graph. And you won't be able to see what the bait is doing. You won't be able to see what the fish are doing in relation to your bait. Anything lighter than that, like I said, it'll just blow right out.
Don't miss the Woodtick Music Festival in Hermansville, Michigan. 4 days of great bluegrass, country, folk, blues, and rock and roll. Over 25 bands. Fun for the entire family. Carry-ins welcome. Kids 12 and under free. Buy your tickets and campsites and find out everything you need to know online at woodtickfestival.com. That's woodtickfestival.com. The Woodtick Music Festival in Hermansville, Michigan.
Throw that guy down here. Another nice little piece of equipment to have that's come out in the last couple of years are these little UV flashlights. They just supercharge any kind of a glow-in-the-dark lure just as good as being out in natural sunlight. Been using them for the last couple of years for salmon fishing, but it's really been a boon for the ice fishing too. So it's usually the low light periods, sunrise, sunset, you're typically when your best bite is. And they like that glow-in-the-dark stuff out here. So I just keep it moving. It's coming up. No, he didn't smack it. He was following it for quite a ways there. It's one trick I do a lot of times. If they've followed the bait up, 8-9 feet off the bottom and they haven't hit it yet, I'll just give it a good yank like that, and then I'll drop the bait down near the bottom so it shoots underneath the fish. And as they start to swim down, I'll start to bring the jig back up, and a lot of times they'll swim up and they'll smack it. Now we got 2 fish down here now. Hopefully we can get a little competition going here between them. Come on. All right, we're going to shoot underneath him. And as he comes down, we're going to bring our bait back up. There, and he came and grabbed it. He'll shoot and scoot. This is just a little fish here, but here we go. That's a number 9 jigging rapala. That's the glow hot perch pattern. And a lot of people say, you use those number 9 rapalas, aren't those too big to use for walleyes? Well, I guess that's proof right there that a walleye just 2-3 times bigger than the bait will hit those big lures. Get him back down.
Well, that's it for the walleyes this season, but it won't be long. The ice will be gone, and we'll be fishing on the opener. Here's what's coming up this week in the UP. This weekend in Ironwood, it's the big Powderhorn Mountain uphill snow drags and the Snowmobile Hill Climb. And just a reminder, your 2012 fishing license expires on March 31st. It's time for the Discovering Tip of the Week.
Well, I guess the single biggest tip I can give folks for keeping their minnows alive is use the biggest container you possibly can to carry them, especially in the wintertime. I'm kind of the more water, the better school of thought. You'd be surprised at the little tiny buckets people bring in and they want to put their bait in. It's like people seem to think minnows like to be in water just because they want to be wet. They don't seem to think about the dissolved oxygen that's in the water that they have to use. If you try to get a dozen minnows, like a dozen sucker minnows, and try to put them in a little tiny bucket like this, you're going to lose $10 worth of minnows within a half an hour. So given the choice, try to bring as big a container as possible. Bring a 5-gallon bucket. Bring a cooler. Coolers work great for keeping your minnows alive. You can put a lot of water in there. You can slowly cool them down once you get out onto the ice. That's the other problem. Is a lot of folks just like to take them right from their minnow buckets and dump them right in the water. If you've ever stepped into an ice-cold shower, you know what kind of reaction you're going to give yourself. Well, it's 10 times worse for minnows. So slowly cool them down, pour a little bit of lake water in their bucket, let it wait for a couple of minutes, pour a little bit more, a little more, and slowly cool them down. Once they're cooled down, then they keep very well for a long time. When you get done fishing at the end of the night, pour off as much of the water as you can and top it off with fresh lake water. When you get home, if you have a little aerator, battery powered, or one that plugs into the wall, just like basic aerator you would get for an aquarium, that's probably the single best thing you can do to help keep your minnows alive in the winter.
If you wandered through nearly any forested area in the Upper Peninsula, you're certain to run into two things: towering stands of maple hardwoods and camps. For those of us who have one, the UP camp is the center of activity for all seasons. Put the two together and you end up with the perfect location for a good old traditional UP maple syrup sugar bush. Tonight we'll take a look at one such camp in part one of Making Maple Syrup.
I started tapping trees quite a few years ago. First time I tapped them was John Belfie at the Wellwood there gave me permission to go in the back there, and I tapped a bunch of his trees. And so when I'd come home from work, I'd pick the kids up from school, and we'd go back there and pick up the sap. And I had made a stove out of an old refrigerator. Laid it down, took the door off, cut the bottom out, made a door that goes in there, put a chimney on it. And the next day, while I was gone to work, my dad would come there. And him and a friend of his, Sorrel Menard, would come over there, and they'd sit there and drink a few beers and smoke their corncob pipes. And by the time I got home, they had it almost all boiled down. So when we first started this is the animal we used to use, but since then we've modernized a little bit. We got ourselves a generator and got a drill, and we got a little bit smarter, I guess. Then we got ourselves a cord here that's about, I'd say about 50 foot long, and it serves the purpose. We can go from one to the other. Now when we tap the trees, we usually like to go in about 2 3/4 inches. I don't know if everybody does that or not, but so I marked it with a piece of tape here so that I don't go in too far. Another thing is, when I tap a tree, I don't want to go one side or the other. I like to go towards the middle of the tree, and then you take and angle it a little bit to get it going. As some of the trees get bigger, if they're over 12 inches, we can put 2 pails on them. Otherwise, we should usually try to stay at least 10 to a 10-inch tree. We don't like to go any smaller than that. I don't know what other people do, but this is what we do. I don't like to go too high because it's no good. We like to stay maybe, but the highest we want to go is about 3 foot. It's not coming out very good yet, but you got to have them days that gets up to about the 40s and stuff like that, and go down into the 20s at night. And in the sunshine. You get good sunshine, that really does it, but even if that, if there's a good wind or something, that cuts her down too. You gotta have the right days for it. The only reason why we do it is because we use the syrup just for ourselves. We give a lot of it away, and then we get a lot of people up here. We give them a quart or 2 or 3, and we kind of divide it up. We never tried to sell it or anything. It's just for our own use, and that's why I guess we never went real big. We probably tap about 150 trees, 60 maybe, and some years it goes good, and sometimes it don't. Like last year, we never made 1 quart of syrup. We didn't. We tapped about 11 trees, and that was about it. And they getting hardly anything, so that's the way it was. But I think the best year we've had is we've made 49 gallons of syrup. And I think the worst year we had, except for not being able to tap or do anything last year, I'd say it was about 19 gallons. So it depends, I guess, on the weather and how it's going to run and all the rest of that. So we try to do our best and make what we can. But there's a lot of people that got a big one. They tap 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 trees, you know. Well, they've got it's a power saw that they got. They put a drill on it, and they can go through and they trap trees a lot faster than what we do. Now, I guess we wait for the sap to start to run. Once we get it running good, we'll be here with our four-wheeler. We got a snow machine. We'll go around through all the trees and pick them all up, pick up the sap, and we'll bring it up to the shack. Otherwise, that's the only thing to do now. Wait for the weather, see how it's gonna pan out for us. Hope it's good. We'll be coming up this weekend, and we'll probably, every couple days, we'll be coming up here from now on, just to make sure, you know, and if it starts to leak, then we'll be staying right at camp there and buy the groceries, get the bacon and eggs and all the rest of that stuff, and we'll stay right here at camp. And we'll probably have some company. I know that for sure. Maybe even you. All right.
Well, now it's all about the weather. Warm days and cold nights. We'll be back at camp next week to check in on Bernie and the crew for the next step, collecting the sap. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week right here on Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.